Hello and welcome to a live deprogram. I am your host, Keri Smith. Welcome back. Today is Friday, September 20th. I'm doing this a little earlier than our usual time because we have electricians coming and they're going to be turning off all the electricity. And so I had to get this done before the electricity goes off. I've also got a lot of work happening right now, right outside this room. I think they're taking a break. So if at some point it becomes too loud outside, we may have to stop early. Welcome to all the regulars in the chat. Hey, I see a lot of familiar faces. Let me know how the audio is. I'm having trouble with this microphone. Give me 1 second. I'm going to try something. This keeps happening with this new mic. Okay. Tell me, how is that? Is that the same? Let's see. There we go. I think that's better. Is that better? This is the mic it should have been. Okay, good. Helena says the audio is good. Okay. I saw that Broken Umbrella said, wow, there's already a Wikipedia note on this stream. That's a first, right? I haven't seen that before. They put the notes on some of my streams, the propaganda notes where they want to make sure you don't get the wrong idea. Think for yourself. So there's already one up on this. I assume that's because the artwork and the title have COVID in the name. So they're still doing that. That's good to know. But welcome to the stream. Again, this is not our usual time. If you're new here, usually I do live streams on Mondays and Fridays at 1 o'clock Central, and we're getting back to that regular schedule next week. It's been a little unusual for the past month. I was on the road traveling with my husband, who was on tour all the way up to Montana. And so we were gone for several weeks, and I had an erratic streaming schedule. And then now being back with the electricians and everything that's going on this week, it's still been erratic. So thanks for hanging with me. Thanks for your patience. We'll be back to our regular schedule next week. But I wanted to go ahead and, rather than not do one today, I really want to talk about this Dr. J. Varma, who got me thinking about a lot. And rather than not do one today, I decided let's just do it early and we'll see who shows up and if people are available. Okay, so I don't know if you saw this guy in the news. I'm going to get right into this. Oh, wait, one announcement first. Hillbilly Elegy. So we've been talking about possibly reading this book for book club, for Deprogrammed Book Club, because it's relevant. J.D. Vance, the author, is currently running on the Republican ticket as the vice presidential nominee. And he's someone who walked away from the left. And this book was a real hit with liberals at first. When it first came out, people were praising it. It was turned into a movie starring Amy Adams, and I forget some other big names were in the film. I haven't seen the film, but due to the book, we're going to read it. We're going to try and get this done before the election because it's relevant. So I know some of you are already reading it. People told me they already have it or they've already read it. We're going to be talking about this book on Tuesday, October 15th, not a Thursday this time, Tuesday, October 15th at 6 o'clock. If you want to be a part of the book club, our book clubs are on camera. You can choose to have your camera on or off. We have not put any of them up on the channel. We've kept them private so that people feel comfortable discussing and being on the camera if they want to. We might change that at some point going forward, but for now, it's going to be private. So if you want to be a part of book club discussion, which is a great time, we had a lot of fun at the last one, you can email me at deprogrammedpod@gmail.com, deprogrammedpod@gmail.com, and just in the subject say book club, Hillbilly Elegy, I want to be in it, and I'll get you the link. So that's the announcement. So today, hey, Force of Light. Hey, Michelle from Force of Light is here. Good to see you. I love this lady. And I've missed our Christian panels. I'm excited to get back, and we're going to be doing one next week. So I'm excited to get back to those. So I don't know if you've heard of this guy, Dr. J. Varma. Dr. J. Varma, I think, is probably best described colloquially as the Fauci of New York City. That's a good way of putting it. He was the expert medical advisor for New York City. He was at, so New Yorkers are very familiar with him. He was at all of the press conferences every day on television, sitting right next to the mayor. He advised on the COVID policy, the very draconian COVID policies in New York City, which included lockdowns, social distancing, forced masking. They closed all the schools. And then they also used the force of the government to coerce vaccination by requiring it of all city employees or they would lose their job, and also coercing the public by instituting discriminatory practices against people who were unvaccinated, so that they had to show a vaccine card to even be able to participate in most parts of society, like going to restaurants or going to grocery stores. You needed a vax card for a lot of things. I personally know several New Yorkers who lost their jobs and several who moved and left New York City because of those draconian policies. They had some of the most oppressive COVID policies in the country. This guy, Dr. J. Varma, was one of the brainchilds behind all of this coercive, manipulative, authoritarian, the measures that they were taking in New York. So let's just watch an old clip of him, and then we're going to talk about what he was doing while he was engaging all this. This is from my friend Libby Emmons. She tweeted this. She writes for the Post Millennial, and she's covered this and is obviously, as a New Yorker, been very personally upset about it. And so she's been on top of it, and I found out about this through her. Some of the video footage we're going to watch a little bit later comes from Steven Crowder's channel. So Libby Evans, she says, Dr. Varma had drug-fueled orgies while mandating that we get vaxxed. He explained why he would not let Kyrie Irving play when he refused. So let's just watch this little news clip. He was all over the news during the COVID years.
Who has been in the hot seat. I asked him, what's his reaction to this move today from Mayor Adams?
So let's talk about the legal reason first. The entire reason that we enacted this mandate, and I use we because I was an advisor to the mayor during the time when this was happening, is because it's so important for adult New Yorkers to be vaccinated to preserve our healthcare system. This virus is not done with us. It continues to evolve and be a threat. The single biggest threat we have in New York is adult New Yorkers getting sick and basically overflowing our hospitals so that it jeopardizes everybody's health and safety. And the single best way to achieve that is to have high levels of vaccination in adults. So this private sector mandate did that. Now, the problem is, as soon as you start to make exemptions for one favored group versus another, and if those exemptions aren't based on the justification, which is that all adult New Yorkers need to be vaccinated, the courts can throw it out. They can say it's what's called arbitrary and capricious, and therefore, you're picking and choosing winners. That's one concern. And the second concern is kind of the social or the moral concern, which is, what type of message does it send to New Yorkers if, rich people, powerful people, connected people basically get to make their own rules? The principle of responding to an epidemic is the same thing as fighting a war. You're all in this together. Everybody has to sacrifice regardless of where your standing is in society.
I'm going to stop it there. I apologize for the low sound. That's as high as I could get that particular clip. And this was the most important part, just the nerve of this man, first of all, to talk about the social and moral implications, the moral duty. Even if these recent revelations had not come to light, there's nothing moral about authoritarianism. There's nothing moral about a government, some men with guns who've been elected to represent you, forcing you with threat of force, backing it up with the full force of the law. There's nothing moral about them telling you you can't go to work, you can't go into a restaurant unless you choose a certain medical procedure, your kids can't go to school, your kids have to wear masks. There's nothing moral about that. There's also nothing scientific about it, as we found out, and as many people were saying during the height of it and being censored for doing so. That part there, when he talks about morality and he says, what type of message does it send to New Yorkers if rich people, powerful people, connected people basically get to make their own rules? What message does it send? What message does it send? Okay, the volume's going to be better on this one. We're going to watch this Steven Crowder expose now. So it seems I'm not a big fan of Crowder anymore. It's my own personal reasons and opinions that don't need to be aired because who cares what I think about that. But I think this clip is necessary, so I'm going to show it, even though it's from that channel. This clip is great. Crowder is apparently doing what Project Veritas has been doing, which is sending people in with secret cameras to try and get some of the biggest monsters that we've seen in public policy on the record when they think that it's no one's listening. You know, what do they talk about when they think no one's listening, or they're bragging to a date about their position and about their accomplishments and their escapades. So let's go through this.
You know, I worked for the mayor of New York City for a year and a half. I ran the police response for the city.
I actually was the one who convinced the mayor to make it a mandate.
So the way we do it in public health.
Did you hear that? He's bragging to the date. I actually was the one who convinced the mayor to make it a mandate. He's bragging about that.
This will make it very uncomfortable. Public health is will make it.
Now, this is hard to hear, although the sound's good, but, you know, it's muffled because this is a secret camera. You can see they have the text of what he's saying at the bottom, but this is where he's about to say, this is that the way that we got people, we forced people to get vaccinated, is we made it very uncomfortable for them to be unvaccinated. He's talking about the full force of the law.
It's very uncomfortable to be unvaccinated. They didn't get vaccinated because they heard it was safe. They gave in because it was really hard.
Do you think you'd have gotten a hard time if New York City found out that you were having sex parties during COVID?
Yeah. Yeah, it would have been real bad.
Yeah.
Look at this guy. She says, do you think you would have gotten in trouble if they found out you were having sex parties during COVID? And he says, yeah, that would have been a real embarrassment. Now, there's a couple of things about this part right here. To me, I think this is a man who is thoroughly given over to darkness and evil. I think that's what happens if you continue down a path of evil choice after evil choice after evil choice. You end up, in my opinion, you end up worshiping all of these false gods, like anonymous sex, like drugs, these drug-fueled parties he was apparently having, like yourself, like your ego. This guy's very proud of having been on TV every day. We're going to hear him bragging about being on TV every day. Very proud of himself. And I don't sense a shred of compassion or empathy in this man for any of his fellow humans or any of the people whose lives were affected by the policies that he created and pushed for. So all the people whose kids were affected, who didn't get to go to school, who were forced to wearing masks, the kids whose development was delayed, which we know the CDC has now said that, you know, the milestones for childhood development, they had to push those out because children are not learning to read or to speak at the same age that they used to be. I wonder why. I wonder if masking everyone so they can't see how your lips are forming words, I wonder if that has something to do with it. Right? So this guy doesn't have any empathy for any of the people he affected. And I think he's honestly, I mean, I would call this man a demon. And what's interesting is that people sometimes talk about the way that that crazy people look, or that thoroughly possessed people look, or that you know, even if you think of it as possessed by animus for his fellow man, or possessed by ego, or if you don't think of it as, you know, a demon, this guy looks like a demon to me. All this to say, this guy looks repulsive to me. I'm repulsed by his behavior, and I think it has affected the way he looks. That's just me. But here we go.
Sex parties during COVID?
Yeah. It would have been a big deal. Yeah, it would have been real bad.
Yeah.
Oh, gross.
So I want you to take yourself back to March of 2020. Okay, mentally, the beginning of the COVID pandemic, right? The streets of New York City looked like a dystopian sci-fi movie, albeit with less charm and more hobo urine. more than normal for New York City. Now, it was even worse than the rest of the country. Thousands of businesses were forced to close. Millions of New Yorkers lost their jobs overnight, and loved ones were forced to die alone in quarantine. And the man you're about to meet is responsible for all of it, Dr. J. Varma.
I spent my career, I worked for the CDC for 20 years, so I kind of lived all over the world doing infectious disease work. So I used to spend time doing public health where I go to different, so I lived in Bangkok and in Beijing and in Ethiopia.
So
and New York.
exciting.
And so what I did was, my job was to go and help countries like build their systems to detect and respond to diseases. So kind of like during COVID, where you had to set up a testing program and a vaccination program, and you need to monitor the numbers. That was like the type of thing I did for my career at CDC, go to different countries and help them do that. The mayor's team contacted me because I was in New York before that, and they contacted me to come back. So I moved back from Ethiopia to New York to run the COVID response for the city. So I like set up all the testing and vaccine program for the city. I actually was the one who convinced the mayor to make it a mandate. I was on TV for maybe a year and a half. So I was on the press conference every day for a year and a half, every morning at 10 o'clock.
What?
Yeah, with the mayor. I had to sit next to him.
For COVID?
Yeah, for COVID, yeah. I'm very Googleable, but I'm not like...
Okay, I didn't Google you.
It's so gross, just filthy, just I cannot imagine, even if you didn't know about all of the hypocritical and hedonistic shit that he was up to during COVID, while he was forcing people to stay home and socially distance and wear masks and not go to school and forcing people to lose their jobs, get the jab or lose their jobs. This guy was having drug-fueled sex orgies and parties, some in the subway and these private gatherings of these hedonists, these elitists. Even if you didn't know that, just the way he's just braggadocious here and is at the date, just gross. And obviously she's playing into it so she can get more information. And she's like, oh, cool. That's so cool. But, he's like, I travel here. I travel there. I work for the CDC. I was there. I was on TV every day. He said that several times. I was on TV. I was on TV at 10 a.m. every day, right next to the mayor. I'm the one that convinced the mayor to make it a mandate. I'm the one. I'm very Googleable. Gross. Just full of self, full of ego. Gross.
I highly go. You can Google me now.
Okay, I'll do
If that turns you on.
Now, there's more to Dr. Varma than mere medical tyranny here. It's a classic story of the rules for thee, but not for me, as we see with a lot of unelected bureaucrats. But this story is not one about hypocrisy. I want to be clear. Everyone's a hypocrite. It's not lost on me. This is a story about those in charge not fearing what it is that they demanded.
Bullshit. First of all, no. Let me. I have to do my own commentary here because we're watching Crowder's video. So I'm going to pull this down for a second. I really don't like. I find that hypocrites like to say, "Oh, first of all, everyone's a hypocrite. Don't worry about hypocrisy." No, that's gross. That's like saying, "Oh, everyone's an adulterer. Don't worry about adultery." Or everyone's an alcoholic. Don't worry about alcoholism. No, gross. Okay, just because something is, everyone's a narcissist, so don't worry about narcissism. No, just because something is a bad trait that can be found in all humans to varying degrees doesn't mean that there are not people who have fully given themselves over to that bad trait and who live in that state, that negative state. And this is a guy who did that. This is a story about hypocrisy. It's a story about a lot of things, honestly. But one of those things is hypocrisy. Yes, hypocrisy is a bad thing. It should be pointed out. It should be discouraged. We should all be trying to root it out of ourselves. Because if your words mean nothing, if what you say and you tell others, this is how you should live, this is how you, or in Dr. J. Varma's case, this is how you will live. I'm going to use the force of law to say this is how you will live, but secretly, I'm not going to live that way. That is important. It's a huge theme in George Orwell's Animal Farm. And I'm sure some of you, we read this for book club for my old channel, and I'm sure some of you remember this. In Animal Farm, these leaders during COVID, like Gavin Newsom was another one who had very draconian policies in his state and then was partying it up. He was caught without mask at a party at the French Laundry, not living rules for thee, but not for me. And Crowder's right. It's also about how they don't fear any repercussions for this at all. That's true. But hypocrisy is not something just to say, oh, everyone's a hypocrite, so don't worry about it. No. Everyone has been hypocritical at one time or another. Yes, that is absolutely true. And that's a bad thing. And it's a bad character trait. And it's something to root out of yourself, because you stand for nothing if you say one thing and do another thing. This is what in scripture, when it talks about, you shall know them by their fruits. You shall know people by their behavior. Behavior means more than words. You see what people really believe based on how they behave. And so when you see a monster level hypocrite like Dr. J. Varma, someone who lives in hypocrisy, who makes rules for others and uses the force of law, the threat of force, to implement those rules and force other people to live the way he says, but doesn't abide by it, that is a huge story. And he should be pointed at and shamed and mocked. And if we had any justice, he'd be on trial. That's what would be happening because of this hypocrisy. It's a terrible character trait. I can't underline that enough. Do you guys remember the line in Animal Farm? Dr. J. Varma is one of the pigs in Animal Farm. And there were a lot of these pigs. And do you remember the line where the pigs kept making these rules for the other farm animals, and then they would break the rules for themselves? And when the farm animals would catch them doing it or see them, they would come up with excuses, just like these elites do, just like these authoritarians do. And one of those quotes someone reminded me of, which is just perfect for this. And it was the pig saying, "It is for your sake that we drink the milk and eat all these apples. We do it for you, the little people. I know we don't let you guys drink the milk or eat the apples. And we said nobody should, but we drink the milk and we eat the apples." And that was what they said. They said, "It is for your sake that we drink the milk and eat these apples." Do you know what would happen if we pigs failed in our duty? That's Dr. J. Varma. "It is for your sake that I did drugs and had sex orgies while I was forcing you guys to stay home and lose your jobs. It was for your sake because I had to do it to blow off steam because I had a duty to protect you guys." This is really what he's arguing. He is the pig. He's the pig. We're going to continue.
You fear in a way that altered your life. You were told to fear going to church. You were told to fear meeting family, fear running your business, or even vote. Remember that? It was so dangerous, you needed to vote from home by any means possible, while you, the peasants, were locked down and not allowed to gather with more than 10 people at a time. Elites like Jay Varma, well, he was hosting sex parties.
It's so funny. It's like this because I did all this like deviant, like sexual stuff, and I'm like, it's like on TV and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And people are like, "Aren't you afraid? Aren't you embarrassed?" And I was like, "No, actually, I'm like really like I love being my authentic self." So
What a piece of shit. He said, "So I did all this deviant sex stuff." While talking about, also, you're about to elaborate, orgies with lots of people there breaking his own, social distancing rules. But, he's like, "I did all this deviant sex stuff while I was on TV." And people were like, "Aren't you ashamed? Aren't you embarrassed?" No. I love being my authentic self. First of all, it's not your authentic self because it is your authentic self, but you're keeping it hidden from the public. You are a hypocrite. You are presenting one thing. You are telling people to live one way and you're living a different way. So you've got this dirty second life, this dirty, immoral, you on TV talking about morality to excuse authoritarian policies, you talking about morality. You have this dirty, immoral, disgusting secret life. It's your authentic self, though, and you love it. But you know what else he loves? I know people like this. He got off on having it be a secret while he was on TV. That was part of the allure and the taboo nature of it for him, I guarantee you. So when he says, people ask me, "Weren't you embarrassed? Weren't you ashamed?" No. Of course not. It's part of it's like for people who cheat, part of what they're getting off on is the evil of it, is the taboo nature of it, is the secrecy of it and the deception. That's what this guy liked. I guarantee you, when he was on television doing these appearances, telling people they had to stay home, they couldn't go to work, they had to choose to get this new experimental shot, they had to mask their kids. I guarantee you, part of him once in a while would think about what he was doing in his disgusting secret second life and get off on it. Like Duper's Delight. Like the serial killer, like killers, like the guy who, Chris Watts, who killed his whole family, his wife, his pregnant wife and 2 kids, and then did a camera interview and was talking to the interviewer about, I hope they come home, that I really miss them, you know. And people noticed in that interview, it was weird. He was kind of smiling in inappropriate moments, because part of you was smiling because you know what you did, you know, this evil thing you did, and you're duping the public. That's what these people are like. I put this monster, I put, yes, there are different kinds of monsters. There are murderers like Chris Watts, and there are monsters like Dr. J. Varma, who use the threat of law, the force of law, to affect people's lives on a mass scale and cause great mass harm. There are different kinds of monsters, but the personality defects, the personality disorder, they're the same. These rotten evil, just eaten up with evil. It's like a person who's given themselves over completely to evil. It's not a matter of like stumbling. You know, a normal person, I was having this conversation with my husband. This story, I know it's about the COVID doctor and New York policy, but here's the stuff it was making me think about. I wrote a new Substack piece, if you want to check it out, on Keri Smith's, kerismith.substack.com. I think that's it. But it just made me think about the difference between sin and living in sin. When I see a monster like this in the news, first of all, I'm repulsed, not just at what he did, but who he is, like who this Dr. J. Varma has become. Maybe he's always been this way, but I doubt it. I think it was a slow process of a series of evil steps. And sometimes I hear non-believers who don't understand the difference between sin and living in sin. And sin, at least in the way I've experienced God since coming to God, is obviously sin is something that all humans do, and you're going to do, and you're going to fail. And God's going to forgive you for it when you have repentance for it. But there's a difference between those individual, you know, struggling with a sin or a temptation and there's a difference between that and living in a sin without any remorse, without any repentance, and not even caring. Like he says, no, I'm not embarrassed or ashamed at all. That's when you've given yourself over to this thing. That's when you worship this thing. That's when the sin is your God. If you have a relationship with God, he's going to convict you about those sins. He's going to convict you about it, and you're going to want to repent because you're going to want to be close to God. That's, in my experience, that's what I found. It's about a hierarchy of things that you love, of passions. My pastor talks about this much more eloquently than I do. But if loving God is at the top of that hierarchy, you're not sad about that bad thing you did because, you know, you're just checking a box because, oh, I got to get to heaven. I got to check this box. And, you know, no, you're checking that box, or you're trying to correct that sin. And you're trying not to do that again because you don't want to sacrifice your relationship with God. You don't want to get away from God. And so as a believer, when I look at monsters like this, I just use it as a personal reminder. I'm like, there but for the grace of God go I. Because you can see the path is wide. The Bible says the path is wide that most people are on, the path to hell. This guy, I'm talking about hell on earth even. His life is a hell. Look at what he worships. Look at all the empty, vain, meaningless stuff he worships. Drugs, sex, ego, self, power, control over others, money, prestige, all that crap that doesn't mean anything. We're going to continue. Just a couple things. They've continued the work outside. So let me know if you can hear that, if it's too loud. And I'm going to answer just a couple questions and we'll continue with this video. British Cat says, who is this gentleman? Can someone give me a short sum up? I don't want to wind back. So he is basically the Fauci of New York City. He was the doctor who advised on New York City COVID policy and is responsible for most of the draconian measures that they took. One of the people responsible in that city, Dr. J. Varma. He was at every COVID press conference sitting right next to the mayor. He did all these public appearances, and he pushed for draconian measures where they forced city employees to get the vaccine, and also where they discriminated against citizens if they didn't choose to get the vaccine. You know, they required vaccine cards for you to access a lot of parts of public life. This guy. And we're talking about him because in the secret camera recordings, it's been revealed, and he's bragging about the fact that all during COVID, all while he was on TV pushing for this, he was having drug-fueled orgies and sex parties behind the scenes. He's like, I'm being my authentic self. Let's continue there.
Actually, I'm like really like I love being my authentic self. So again, every type of range of everything.
Okay.
And I've been to a lot of like sex parties, lots of like play parties and stuff.
Okay, so what were the sex parties during COVID?
So that I didn't. So I never went to a like public type one. We actually had my wife and I like had one with our friends, like in August of like that first summer. Because all our friends were just like, well, it wasn't so much sex. They were just like, I need to get like this energy out of me and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So we rented a hotel. I think kind of sneaky about it because hotels didn't want people gathering there. Because I was like, I like how like everybody get tested the right way. Told me where to get tested. Showed me the results. And it was fun. We all like took like Molly, and just like there's like 8 or 9 of us, and then 8 to 10 of us in a room, and everybody had a blast because everybody was like so pent up because it had been like everybody was just like stuck together and stuff like that. Yeah, and sometimes it isn't so much about like some it's just something about like bodies being close to each other, like just being like naked with friends.
During COVID, we just had private parties. I think COVID was big. Yeah, so it was just home in our home or other places. That was the one we did during COVID because in like it was like August 2020, all of our friends, people were friends, stuff who were all in this play poly world. Everybody was just like pent up, and so I did like a whole like testing protocol for everybody. It was a relatively small. I mean, small as in like no COVID test. It was like 10 to 12 people.
Okay, so violate.
Let me just remove that guy for a second. Just first of all, he's in this poly play community with his wife. Chalk another loser point up for polyamory. And you know, it's no secret that I find polyamory to be an evil joke. And I make no bones about that. And I know there are people who disagree with me, even in my community, and that's fine. We can disagree and not be rude to one another. But, you know, he's in this deviant world already. And then I appreciate the way he says, oh, don't worry, they weren't public parties. We had private gatherings at hotels with all of our friends. I mean, what's the difference when you're bringing all these people into the hotel rooms, you know, for these sex orgies? And you know, he even says we had to sneak around to get the hotel rooms and stuff booked because they didn't want large gatherings. Yeah, because your policy said no large gatherings. So there were people sacrificing. There were people who could not go see their loved ones in the nursing home because of you. There are people whose loved ones died in the hospital without getting to see family because of you. There were people who were not allowed to have funerals for their loved ones because of you. And you're sneaking around having these deviant, oh, it was so much fun. And we blew off steam and all these poly fun people, you know, it's just about bodies and maybe not so much about the penetrative sex even as it was about just disgusting. Yes, Therese, but you can't have Thanksgiving with your family. Remember they were saying that? And some places, was New York one of these places that said, actually, I don't even think they allowed Thanksgiving gatherings, but there were some places that were saying if you gather with your family, it can only be this number of people and you have to wear a mask and nobody can play an instrument. Remember that? Nobody can play an instrument. You might get COVID if you play the clarinet. Rosa, he seems like he has antisocial personality disorder, sociopathy, and psychopathy. Absolutely no remorse or shame for his deviant behavior. Thank you. Yes. I also think this is a cluster B individual. I also think this is a person who has a personality disorder, which used to be called a character disorder for a reason, who's thoroughly eaten up with evil. And yes, he has no remorse, no shame. A normal person, as I was talking about before, let's say you're not a believer and you don't really jive with all I'm talking about with sin, like the difference between sin and living in sin. So let's say you're not a believer. I'll put it this way. You, non-believer, when you do something bad that you know to be bad, do you have or try to have a system of moral integrity? Do you feel bad about that? Do you feel remorse? Do you have embarrassment about it? Do you go and try to make amends with people? Or do you just not care? This guy doesn't care. That's that class of people that are personality disordered. They don't have any empathy for other people. They don't experience that. They don't understand what that even is. You cannot shame a sociopath or a psychopath. Somebody said, this guy might be in a really bad place right now, or, he did delete his Twitter, but, he might be considering harming himself. I don't think so. Sociopaths don't do that. It's part of the reason I don't think Jeffrey Epstein, like a lot of people, he didn't kill himself. They don't kill themselves. They can't be shamed. They can't be shamed. He went offline so he wouldn't have to deal with people calling him out about this, because it did make the mainstream news. Surprisingly, I didn't think it was going to, but it even made the New York Times. Leaf Cat, I'm so sorry. Leaf Cat 07 says, my mom died at home September 2020 because she was denied hospital admission due to COVID restrictions. Yeah. These are the real life repercussions. They always talked about life and death. Remember, they were always like, if you don't do what we want, you're killing grandma. No, you killed people's grandmas. I'm so sorry. Laura says, as someone that was told, take the jab or you're fired, I take this type of rhetoric very personally. My blood boils. Yeah, Laura, I understand. I interviewed people like you who were being told by their job, in part because of government pressure and coercion, that they had to take this jab or get fired. I know a lot of people who were put in that position. Hey, two sisters and some yarn. Give it up for one of our mods. She's here. She says, we all fall short, but we are to discern, not excuse away the failings. Exactly. Thank you. You're much better at explaining what I was trying to talk about earlier with the difference between sin and living in sin. Thank you. Okay, let's continue. I'm going to skip ahead just a little bit.
The only way I could do this job for the city was if I had some way to blow off steam every now and then.
Do you think you'd have gotten like a hard time if like the New York City found out that you're having sex parties during COVID?
Yeah, it would have been real embarrassing.
Yeah, you can keep it. Yeah, keep it.
Actually, the only time I felt kind of nervous was fairly early on, right when we were about to do the vaccine mandate, right before we did it. There hadn't been any like dance bars in New York City yet. And we went to we had a wild night, like we went to like a boat, there's always dance parties on boats. And then we went to some like underground like dance party, like underneath the bank. And we were all rolling, we were all taking Molly, and everyone was high. And I was so happy because it hadn't been in like a year and a half, like a year or whatever. And but I was looking around being, look at the because this was not
Wait, when was that?
It was like May or June of 2021. So it was like the spring. So the vaccines had become available, but nobody had really kind of thought about having like, well, I hadn't thought of going to a big party.
Was the vaccine mandate out?
Not yet. It was for small groups. It was for certain city workers, but there wasn't a citywide, you can't go to clubs or bars yet. That happened in June.
So people were like losing their jobs at that time if they didn't get it?
There might have been, but not it's a very small number of people. How
big was the party?
maybe 200 people. It was like the bottom of some bank.
And then when your turn comes up to get the vaccine, we want you to get that because that is the path to parties.
Okay, so that's
I just, there's so many things in that part. He did, first of all, he did the Orwellian animal farm pig excuse there of we have to eat the apples and milk because we have a duty to you. We have to break the rules we set for you. We have to have different rules for us. He did that thing where he says, I had to do this to be able to blow off steam so I could do this job, this COVID Czar job that I have. He did that thing. I had to do this to blow off steam. Then he starts bragging about, so at first he said that the sex parties were just private, right? Like just him and a bunch of people that he organized in hotels and sneaking around having these orgies and on drugs. Well, then he admits, no, actually I was at all these dance clubs and parties with 200 people, one on a boat, one under the city, under a Manhattan bank in the subway system, 200 people there rolling. We're all doing Molly. We're all having a great time, right? And talking about being on camera at the time. And he didn't say the only time I felt shame or remorse was then. No, he said the only time I felt nervous. He felt nervous that he would get caught. It's about him. It's narcissism. It's just about him and repercussions to him. He didn't care at all. And then when she asked about, were people losing their jobs at that time, and he blows that off, and it's just a small number of people, who cares? This guy, we should have Nuremberg style trials for these people, for Fauci, for Dr. J. Varma. If there were justice, this guy would not have his freedom anymore. This guy belonged, he partied it up under a bank. He belongs under the prison, in my opinion. His decisions, his authoritarianism led to people's deaths. It's not just about losing their jobs. It led to deaths. Where's the justice for this guy? Our whole system is broken, that this is not the number one thing we're talking about, is getting justice for these authoritarian policies during COVID. From these monsters. We're going to skip ahead just a little bit. Actually, no, let's play what Crowder says about this part.
seems bad at first glance and second and all of them. But I'm willing to bet that giant sex parties are not what you missed most, and certainly not what you missed out on most during the COVID pandemic, if you were in New York. Probably loved ones, holidays, family gatherings, especially around Thanksgiving and Christmas, that time where Governor Cuomo was sicking law enforcement on unsuspecting citizens and you were being chastised by your elected officials. What about that? What did Mr. Varma do then?
Health officials discouraging travel during the approaching holiday season as scores of cities are dealing with surges in coronavirus cases.
My wife's family was in Seattle and they went back over Christmas, that first COVID Christmas. I couldn't go because publicly I encouraged New Yorkers not to travel. And so, the mayor was like, you really can't go with your family, you gotta stay here. Because if they catch you on, if somebody takes a picture at the airport of you, they'll...
Did the mayor know about your party?
No. I'm talking about that part of my life.
Yeah.
Okay, that one's
just the arrogance, the absolute hypocrisy of it, and no shame. He's like, we had told people they could not travel for the holidays to see their family, but my wife did. All my family traveled to see one another, but I couldn't go because I might get caught in my hypocrisy. There might be a picture of me, and the mayor told me I couldn't. If the mayor had told him he could, like, he would have done it. Just a pig. Just an absolute pig.
pretty rough too. But I'm sure these people believe some of what they espouse. For example, a lot of you who didn't get the vaccine, right? Because you believe there was some kind of natural immunity if you'd already had the virus, and you were told absolutely not. That's not the case, especially in New York. Social distancing masks, you need a minimum of 4 doses of the vaccine.
And if you're 50 years old or above, you need 4 doses.
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
sure that's consistent when they don't know cameras are running, right?
I know people that like won't have sex with someone that didn't get like, the COVID vaccine. And I don't know enough to know if that's like
Sorry, that's like a weird, like, I think it's a weird, like, belief that somehow, like, their body is different. It's not any difference at all. Everybody's exposed to the virus, and they're exposed to the virus because it breathed on you, or because you got infected. Okay.
Oh, so it is the same. You do build up an immunity towards it if you've had it. Yeah. Well, we already knew. I didn't need this asshole to tell me that. We already knew. But thanks. It's nice to hear you at someone like Dr. J. Varma admit that after they bald-faced lied to us during the COVID years and told us you don't build up an immunity to it.
Okay, so it turns out science is a thing, and that one looks kind of bad. But let's not rush to judgment. Don't write Dr. Varma off as some power-hungry villain just yet. Good people sometimes do bad things, or they make mistakes. Those in charge could still have been looking out for you, and in no way does this prove that people like Dr. Varma get a thrill out of psychologically manipulating people to abuse their own power, exert control, while completely disregarding the life-destroying rules that they apply to people like you, right? Right?
When it comes to the vaccine, I think people will believe it more if it's really consistently validated by healthcare professionals.
Dr. Blasio. So how did you convince him to do it?
I had actually been talking to him about it since even before the vaccines were available. I was like, you're going to have to do it this way. And so he came up with this metaphor. We're going to climb this ladder. We're going to first start voluntarily, and then we're going to be pushing this.
So the way we do it in public health is we make it very uncomfortable to be unvaccinated. There's vaccines like, oh, you can't get a job, you can't go to a restaurant, you can't go to school. It's like, it's going to get vaccinated.
So was it technically like kind of forcing you?
Yeah, that's what you force.
Yeah, you hear that? Hey, all you people! I'm going to talk to the leftists right now. Not all of them. I know a lot of people on the left who are based, who did not fall for this COVID garbage, but it was, as a sample size of the public, pretty small, because most leftists, turns out, their beliefs don't mean anything and they just do whatever the tribe tells them. And so suddenly they went from being supposedly anti-big pharma and anti-authoritarianism to just fully on board with big pharma and authoritarianism. I'm talking to those people. Those of you who got fooled by COVID policy. I mean, he's sitting here admitting, like, yeah, we just used force. The government just forces people to get this new and experimental shot. We just forced them. We made it very uncomfortable for them. He even says, you can't go to work, you can't go to restaurants, and your kid can't go to school. So that's going to force you to get it. This is authoritarianism. You leftists who think you're liberal, who went along with this and who tried to shame people, and you're so susceptible to programming. You're so susceptible to manipulation. You're the people in the Ash conformity experiment where they are, were asked to pick the longest line, and they have a bunch of plants there who pick a line that's not the longest. You're the guy who every single time goes with the group. That's you. You don't believe in science. You're just a tribalist. You're just a follower. You're just a sheep. You're mindless. Yes, Sadicus, that was gleeful, so disturbing. Yes, he gleefully gloats about how he came up with the idea to do mandates to force people to get this vax. He gleefully brags about it. This is how we do it. Yeah, we forced it. Yes, Jen, the pleasure on his face is saying it all. Yes, gets off on controlling people. Sociopathic is what it is.
To be unvaccinated. There's vaccines like, oh, you can't get a job, you can't go to a restaurant, you can't go to school. It's like, it's going to get vaccinated.
So was it technically like kind of forcing you?
Yeah, that's what you force people by making it really uncomfortable. The car comes with seatbelts and airbags. You have to like actively, and it beeps all the time. So you can still drive with a seatbelt, right? The car doesn't shut off, but it beeps all the time.
Right.
This is your seatbelt.
so brilliant.
Yeah, that's the whole idea. The whole idea is like you build barriers so that people are like just gonna do it because I'm tired of being harassed.
So it was like
He even used the word harass. He even used the word harass, that the government's intent was to harass people to the point that they chose to get this experimental shot.
Yeah, and the whole point of the education is, this is where I have like all these talks I give people in public health about it. It's like, people think, oh, I'm going to give you lots of information so you'll do the right thing. No, the reason I give you the information is so that I'm going to make it really hard to be unvaccinated. And then I'm going to also give you a lot of information about getting vaccinated and why it's good. So that once you finally say, it, I'm just going to get vaccinated, you at least know that, oh, well, at least they told me it's really safe. So do you understand the difference? They didn't get vaccinated because.
Do you also notice what he said there? He didn't say, well, at least I know it's safe. He said at least they told me it's really safe. I think that's languages can be very telling. And I think that's very telling.
They heard it was safe. They gave in because it was really hard.
It's not so much about finding them and arresting them. It's about making the default, what we call the default choice, the easy one. So you just have to do it that way.
I mean, are people like really smart enough to deal with this on their own?
No, that's why we require it.
Look at that smile. She says, are people even smart enough to deal with this on their own? Like to make their own decisions, like bodily autonomy, like what you leftists always say you believe in when it comes to abortion, right? Like you should be able to choose. It's also what you say when you defend something vile and reprehensible, like children being able to choose to mutilate themselves, to have their body parts cut off and to be given sterilizing hormones. That's what you say. But when it comes to choosing whether or not to take a new experimental shot, no, they're not smart enough, he says. That's why we require it. No, they're not smart enough. They can't choose on their own. We require it. They don't get to choose on their own. They're not smart enough. That's what he's saying. Defend this, leftists, defend it. Defend this crap. I'm not talking to the true liberals. I'm not talking to the true progressives who were based and have, were anti-big pharma. I'm not talking, I know some who were out protesting in Georgetown, Texas, every week against the mask mandates, against the vax mandates, and they were on the left. I'm not talking about those few people. I'm talking about the majority of the cult and those of you who went along with it. Like, defend this crap.
And that's why I told you about the education. It's like, I don't expect the education to change your behavior. I'm just going to make it really hard for you to do your job. And then I'll give you education so that when you finally give in, you'd be like, oh, well, I guess it was the right thing.
Yeah. All I can say to people is that this is not a conspiracy. This is like people working flat out, doing the best they possibly can.
I think the important thing here is just, again, be led by the facts and the data.
Oh, the COVID vaccine?
Yeah.
Not cases. But the guys who are vaccinated are like right wing.
I mean, but okay, what do we do with those people?
That's why you have to have rules, because you can't convince them. You have to just pass laws that say like you got to do this. So that's what we do in public health. There's nothing else we can do. So I can't always just do it the right thing to do. Is I have to also make sure it's the right thing with the whole world of everybody else.
Yes, those. No.
Yeah. So you heard him. We're all nutcases. And we just have to be forced because we will not choose what they want us to choose. And you're right. Hell no, I did not choose it. I don't regret that a day of my life. I've never regretted not getting that stupid experimental shot. And, yeah, you would have to put a gun to me. And, that there's no way I would ever choose to do that. So he's right about that. But nutcases, who are you to judge nutcases? You were having drug-fueled sex orgies with 200 people while you were telling everyone that this was a deadly virus, so deadly that they could not go to work and their kids couldn't go to school and they couldn't travel to see their family. So Dion, why are they always perverts? This is not just a trivial question. I think there's a lot of validity in this, Dion. So many times when I see someone who's being an absolute monster in public, like this Dr. J. Varma guy or like Fauci, I'm like, let's just wait. Let's just see what comes out about this person. Because I don't believe there's any way you can get to that place. This is why I was talking about living in sin and getting to a place where you've thoroughly given yourself over to evil. I don't think you can do that on a mass scale without also having all these, perversions in your private life. I think there's always something some shoe that's going to drop, something that's going to come out, because what you see in the public facing person like Dr. J. Varma is someone who is an authoritarian and is forcing this on people with the force of government telling you have to get this experimental shot. I absolutely suspect that there's disgusting, immoral behavior in his personal life. It depends on what that immoral behavior might be, but I think there's going to be something there that's uncovered. So that's just been my experience in seeing that pattern recognition. Spaceman says, wrong, Keri. The true progressives allowed this to move forward and to happen. Well, I know what you're saying. This is just, we're using different terms then to describe different things. We agree. We're just using different words. So I could use a different word. What I meant was people who are truly liberal in their thinking, who don't agree with mandates, who don't agree with authoritarianism, who don't agree with the government telling you what you have to do with your body, who don't agree with the government suspending individual rights and liberty. Those are the people I was talking about. And the ones specifically, I guess when I called them progressive, it's an old habit. The ones who are very sincerely against big pharma, who question corporations, and who were against, obviously, because they're into science and natural health, and they were against forced masking of kids. I know some people on the left who were protesting these mandates every week and did not go along with their tribe. And for some of them, COVID is what woke them up. COVID is what woke them up that, hey, something crazy is happening on the left. But I hear you. Long last name says, YouTube is giving me a COVID-19 wiki link under the video. Yeah, they're already putting their propaganda on this video. Mark, thank you so much. Mark says it well. Mark says, sin darkens intellect and empathy. You can't live like that unaffected. Yes, that's what I was trying to say. You said it much more succinctly. Thank you. Jen. Hey, Jen, she says, that also reveals they knew it wasn't a danger to most people. Yeah, but he still calls us nut jobs, right? Isn't that funny? Even though he talks about natural immunity is real and all this, but he's still got to call the unvaxxed nut jobs. And we're just so crazy. We're so crazy not to want to put this new shot that hasn't been around long enough for longitudinal studies, so we have no idea what the side effects are going to be. We're so crazy. We're nut jobs for not wanting to put that in our body or put that in your children, right? I've got just a little bit more here from this Crowder video with the hidden camera. Okay, so he starts talking about this basketball player that they did not allow to play because he didn't get the vax.
Extremely difficult. Interesting fact, one of those nutcases was NBA star Kyrie Irving.
The team just announced that superstar point guard Kyrie Irving won't play or practice with the team until he's eligible under the local COVID-19 vaccination mandate.
There's a basketball player named Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving, he refused to get vaccinated. But because he played for the team in Brooklyn, because the vaccine mandate that I passed, he was not allowed to play. So there's this huge national issue about why Kyrie Irving wasn't allowed to play basketball because he was refusing to get vaccinated. Like, this is a fun part of my life. So I got to be...
This is a fun part of my life, he says, while talking about how the mandates that he takes credit for, is that the mandates that I created, I used those to make sure that this unvaccinated player could not play, could not do his job, could not be a part of the team. He's bragging about it and then says, this is a fun part of my life. And he's bragging about being in the media. Ego. narcissism, no empathy.
National issue about why Kyrie Irving wasn't allowed to play basketball because he was refusing to get vaccinated. Like, this is a fun part of my life. So I got to be on, so the Wall Street Journal wrote a whole story about me being the one that blocked Kyrie Irving from playing basketball.
I was not expecting, a mandate to be brought down in a way that it wasn't going to allow me to play at all.
I just think he's passive. He's an ass because he's like trying to I'm not in a position to tell him how to dribble better or how to shoot better. Like, I can be a fan and I can say, oh, I wish he did it, but I'm not going to be like, I think go coach him. Why is he turning around and saying that, like, I'm not going to tell him he doesn't know how to dribble when he knows how to dribble. Like, don't tell me, like, how the science works.
Oh, go F yourself, you evil. This part for me, just this part, I know everybody's got different parts of this undercover sting video that really just makes them angry. This makes me see red. Like, how dare you? You don't own science, you dumb. I'm going to say the language. You don't own science. You're not like Fauci tried to own science too. If you disagree with me, you disagree with science. BS. Never let someone do this to you. Never let someone do this to you. Science is not a faith like with a holy book like the Bible. It's not there's nothing that's written down that's like, this is what you must believe. Science doesn't require your faith. Science just requires transparency of methods, of methodology, and repeatable results. That's it. You have to be transparent about how you did the studies, and you have to be able to repeat the results over and over until we start to say, okay, this looks like this is true. They didn't do that with this. Don't talk about the science. You didn't have long enough. I'll tell you about the science. This vaccine had not been around long enough to even do a longitudinal study. So everything you're saying is horse manure. Everything he's saying is horse manure. He can't claim to know what the science was because it had not been around long enough. It still hasn't been around long enough for longitudinal studies. They're still finding out, oh, it looks like, yeah, it does this to you and it does that. And oh, yeah, it might cause these things that I won't mention on this video because I don't want to get banned. But they're starting to say and admit, oh, yes, look, it looks like it increases your chances of this. They didn't know any of that, so they couldn't warn people or tell people. But look at that smug. This is what makes me angry, that smug smirk of like, I'm so smart and I own science. No, you don't. Kyrie Irving has just as much of a right to look at you and say, sorry, dude, the science doesn't say what you're telling me it does. Because you know what? That he's speaking truth if he says that. If he said that at the time, if he says it now. Always speak truth. They lied. They lied about the science. You know what his real job was? You know, he's like, I don't come on the basketball court and tell Kyrie Irving how to play basketball. So why does he think he can tell me? And then he says something about science, which is BS. You know what your real job was, dude? What would have made, why does he think he can tell me how to hypocritically control people with the force of government and the threat of force of men with guns? Why does he think he can tell me how to be an authoritarian and ruin people's lives? I know how to do that. I'm the expert. Why does he think he can tell me how to be a hypocrite? That's your job. That was his job. That's what he did. What was the effect of this man? His policies killed people.
There was no plan in place. There was no vision of like how it's going to work for our team. And I think that really impacted not just me, but a lot of people. So, just had to sit in that hot seat for a little bit and deal with it, man. Life of a martyr, bro.
If only Kyrie Irving was having underground sex parties as opposed to trying to make a living through his elected profession. But the same, by the way, can be said of trade workers, business owners, employees all across New York, and, by the way, the country. Again, for you, the COVID policies were devastating.
The mayor admitting this morning the NYPD's social distancing enforcement efforts aren't working. A rough arrest of a young mother with her child in her hands.
Life-altering. But for people in charge, like Varma, it was actually pretty easy. Well, I'll let him explain it to you.
Oh, like, how did you not, like, go crazy during it?
I think the reason I did it is because I felt like I had control.
Yeah.
It was getting done to you.
Yeah.
It was like I was the one like making the decisions about what happened. So
Ah.
I didn't feel like I was lost control. And I think that's what really ends up freaking any of us out. Like when your life is like all uncertainty, it's tough, right?
And there it is.
Did you hear that? He says, she's like, how did you deal with COVID? He said, well, for other people, it was getting done to you. Somebody else was making the decisions and controlling your life. But I was the one with control. I was the one controlling everything. So it didn't affect me the same way it did the little people whose lives I thought I had the authority to dictate, whose rights I thought I had the right to take away. You know, it was my duty. I hate these people with such a blinding rage. In a just world, as I said before, this man would be in prison for the rest of his life at the very least. At the very least. Certainly never allowed to practice any kind of medicine or be any kind of medical advisor or work in any kind of public policy position again. Since we don't live in a just world and the justice system is probably not going to do anything, we're not going to see Nuremberg-style trials for these guys. Not anytime soon, I don't think, unfortunately. I hope he is publicly scorned and shamed. Because, as I mentioned, sociopaths like this guy, they don't have the ability to feel shame naturally. He doesn't feel remorse for what he did. He's upset that he got caught. He's upset that he was stupid enough to brag about all this stuff and get caught on camera. He doesn't feel bad for what he did. If he offers a fake public apology, I cannot wait to cover that. There's nothing more disgusting than a sociopath, a narcissist, doing a fake apology and trying to appear human. You know how he said the government, we made it so uncomfortable for you. We made it so uncomfortable for you to have a life, to work, for your kids to go to school. You couldn't go to restaurants. We made it so uncomfortable for you. I hope everyone makes life very uncomfortable for Dr. J. Varma. If this is someone I knew in real life, you know, I would never associate with again. If I knew him casually through as a colleague or work, you know, never, nothing, what would want nothing to do with this evil. Leaf Cat. Wow, of course it did. Leaf Cat says his wiki has already been edited to say that this interview was taken out of context. What does that out of context mean? It means when they say out of context, what possible context could make this okay, what he just said? What possible context? None. When they say out of context, they just mean I got revealed for the monster I am, and I don't like it. He was his authentic self. Remember that part of the video? His authentic, hidden, secret self. He was his authentic self, and he doesn't like his authentic self being out there for the public to look at and to contrast it with his public self. Yeah. A lot of the news that's been coming out this past week, I have almost no words for some of it because it's just contemplating, you know, the depth of human evil, of what humans are capable of doing to their fellow humans, and sometimes it leaves me speechless. Hey, Randy Wallen, good to see you. Sorry I'm doing an earlier stream, Randy. We've got electricians coming. They're going to turn off all the power soon. So I appreciate the super chat. Thanks for supporting Deprogrammed. Randy for $4.99 says, I'm giving you money since you'll undoubtedly be demonetized on this one. Evil is everywhere. All the devil has is lies. Thank you very much. I already know. Yes, I will be demonetized on this one. There's no way. that they still demonetize on anything that has to do with COVID. Yeah, Lily, what's the context for this? Right? Right. What possible context could explain away what he was saying? They treat us like we're stupid. You know, he said as much. He said as much, like the public's too stupid to choose whether or not to get this new experimental vaccine, so we're going to make the decision for them and force them. That's how they think about when, you know, they've issued a statement that this is taken out of context or whatever, you know, like we're dumb. Oh, okay, I get it now. It was just out of context. Too arrogant to suspect he may get caught. Absolutely. Also, a lot of times it's the arrogance that is the downfall of sociopaths, because like you said, he thinks he'll never get caught, bragging, you know, bragging on camera, not knowing he's on camera, but bragging to these girls that are going on these dates with him about what he did. Real Raven 2000. I have no patience for these people anymore. They're literally murderers. Yeah. And Ron Copperman asks, has anything been done to him or anything to help prevent repeating it? Is this show the tip of the spear? This is just the beginning, hopefully. You know, if I were to make a prediction, they're not going to do anything to him. I don't think we'll see any kind of justice under the law, but I hope I'm wrong. I hope they prove me wrong. One thing that I was pleasantly surprised to see is that it's not just the base media, the alternative media, like Post Millennial did a big piece on it. It's not just Post Millennial and those places covering it. The mainstream news has been forced to cover it, and I was a little surprised to see that New York Times covered it. So it is becoming a bigger story than they probably would like. But it remains to be seen what happens to this guy. He took his Twitter offline. He did do that. And then this quote is just great. Thank you, Dion, Queen of Quotes, for being here. You always have the best, most appropriate quotes for Deprogrammed. And this one is by George Gilder. A culture that does not aspire to the divine becomes obsessed with the fascination of evil, reveling in the frivolous, the depraved, and the bestial. What a perfect quote. I almost want to edit my Substack from yesterday to add this because it's just so appropriate for what I was talking about. It's a beautiful quote. Thank you. That's exactly what, you know, my mind, when I started thinking about this doctor, went down that path, as it tends to go sometimes, that path about evil, again, just human nature and human evil and what people are capable of. And, you know, one of the things I said in that piece is, for believers, you know, if you struggle with sin, let's say you have a habit or something you're trying to kick, or let's say you're struggling with some kind of temptation. I always take monsters like this, like Dr. J. Varma, as, you know, I feel revolted by what they've done and what they've allowed themselves to become, but then I take it as this glorious warning sign and just a reminder of where that wide path leads. You know, thank God for my salvation. Thank God that I didn't end up like this guy. You know, thank God that I didn't lose all my humanity. I was on that path. You know, I already know where that wide path leads, and seeing a monster like this who's completely overcome by evil, it reminds me of that. It reminds me of that. It's sort of like when you're sober. My husband and I have been sober about 5 years, and it's sort of like every once in a while, if you get a craving, like every once in a while, I'll have a moment of nostalgia where it's like, oh, you know, a glass of champagne would be delightful if I still drank, you know. And I always force myself to continue the thought process and visualize what would happen after that first drink, because, you know, where I would end up right back in the same place. I already know where that leads, and I force myself to think about it, and it kills that desire. And looking at a person like Dr. J. Varma is kind of similar, where when I see a monster like this, it's a good exercise to go, yeah, like, for example, any person who's struggling with any temptation, that's a vice or a sin, or, you know where that path leads. Look at this Walking Dead example in front of you. There, but for the grace of God, go you, go I. Like, so why even open a door to any of that? I don't know if that makes sense. It makes sense. My husband and I were talking a little about it, and we're on the same page, but I'm like, sometimes it's hard for me to articulate. That's why I wrote the Substack piece. I was like, I'm trying to tell you what I'm thinking about here. Like Dr. J. Varma made me think of The Walking Dead. He's The Walking Dead. This is a person who is dead to human, dead to his fellow human, to his fellow man, doesn't give a crap about his fellow man. Whatever, I don't see any shred of humanity left in a person like that. Thoroughly given over to hedonism, ego, self, drugs, meaningless sex, just pursuing some high or chasing some high and never reaching it. You know, what a miserable, disgusting little toad. Thank God you're not like that. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up. I've got, as I mentioned, some electricians coming, and we're going to have to shut off all the power. Oh, Super Based. Thank you so much for being here. Super Based says, I got 10 gifties to match. Let's get everyone a membership. Oh, and thank you. Yeah, Super Based gave 10 memberships, so 10 people should have just gotten their membership. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, Super Based. So what does that mean? To match? You're looking for someone to match that and do the same? Okay, well, I'll just in case someone wants to do that, I'll keep going for just a little bit. This is Super Based is one of the membership fairies here at Deprogrammed who shows up once in a while and drops memberships. And yeah, I'm so grateful for you. Thank you. Adam Worrell's here. I see some familiar faces. Bye, Helena. Okay. I might actually have to wrap it up because I can hear them right outside, the contractors. Okay. Anyway, thank you guys for being here. We're going to be talking about this book, Hillbilly Elegy by J.D. Vance. And we're going to be talking about, you have a little less than a month to read it if you haven't started it yet. We're going to talk about it on Tuesday, October 15th at 6 o'clock. If you want to be a part of the book club discussion, hit me up, send me an email at deprogrammedpod@gmail.com. And in the email, just say, book club, I want to be a part, where's the link, etc. Tell me what your screen name is so I know who you are. That would be great. And I can't wait to talk about this with you guys. We always have a great time at book club. And this was not too long. There's also, I know some of you have seen the movie. I haven't seen that yet, but there was a movie made that was based on the book. And that was before the left completely turned against J.D. Vance and decided they hate him. So yes, Mark, thank you, Mark. Mark says it's a short, easy, engaging read. So I hope you guys join us. I want to get the book club with my personal goals, each episode is to try to have a few more people there each time until we build it way back up again. Okay. I will see you guys on Monday at the regular time at 1 o'clock Central. And I hope you have a great weekend. Take care, everybody. Bye.